Okay, Aslak is going to talk about something quite different.
Well, not that different. I'm using some of the same models, and as you will see, but I'm talking about Atlantic hurricane surge threat as they're seen in tide gauge records, and I also make a projection based on the statistical models. So first a little bit about the motivation. So this is, you can see there's a huge database of storm tracks here globally. And this is if you have the tropical storm counts here from the Atlantic, then there's a clear apparent trend in the storm counts. But there's a problem that there's an observational bias in this database. Here you can see the 2005 hurricane season compared to the 1933. And here in the open ocean, there are basically no storm tracks in the old data. Probably because they were just not seen. Another motivation is that the hurricanes, they're very important, so understanding them is quite important for society. So here's a record of hurricane damages, and you can see there's a huge increase, of course, for many different reasons. But you can correct it if you correct it for the wealth at risk at the coastline, then you get something like this. This is the time series then of hurricane damages. The average damages in 2013 dollars is $14 billion per year from hurricanes. And but there you can see there's also no apparent trend in this data set. But you can also look at this exactly the same data here. This is the frequency of extreme hurricane loss events, with different thresholds. So the very hot colors down here, they are very rare events. The hottest color corresponds to the top 24 events that are greater than about $17 billion. And you can see when you fit a trend, no matter where you put threshold, then there's an increase in time. So it looks like there's an increase in frequency in this hurricane data. Hurricanes there are quite challenging to model in the TCMs. Warmer sea surface temperatures, they tend to favor tropical cyclones. Actually, it also depends on the mixed layer depth. But there's also wind shear tends to be unfavorable. And in a warming world, you might have an increase in wind shear, vertical wind shear, which hampers formation. So the relationship is not trivial. When you look at this observational data, then it is there's basically no consensus. It's not clear if the things you see, if they are like rise above the natural variability, or if it is or if the trend is just due to this observational biases over time. So an idea is to try to look for this, make a new record based on the tide gauge records, and it's just based on the observations that cyclones that generate storm surges, and in these regions where we have tropical cyclones, then they're actually the primary reason of the very extreme storm surges, at least. And they're also the most harmful aspect of tropical cyclones, the storm surges. So therefore, like a storm surge record of the cyclones is somehow particularly important for society. So this is that's the motivation for this study. Here's an example. This is the 2005 season, and you can see here the hurricane tracks, color-coded, and there's corresponding events up here, and how it looks in this particular tide gauge. And you can see as when you have a cyclone that passes close by the tide gauge, you also have a big surge. Also here, Katrina, it is still quite some way away, but you can see it's a clear signal. Something like Tammy, there's no signal, it made landfall on the other side of Florida there. And Wilma, which made landfall down here in the south of Florida, you actually have a sea level drop as the water is being pushed away from the coast up there. So the pre-processing that I do of this tide gauge is the first thing I do is to take 24-hour moving means. That's just a simple way to remove the tides and also to remove any possibility of changes due to instrumental methods that has been used. The next thing I do is I make a high-pass filter where I take the day-to-day difference and the absolute value of that. That means that I count something like Wilma also as a surge, even though it's negative. It's a drop in sea level. That means that my instrument up here can actually see things happening down quite far away. It's to increase the sensitivity of my instruments. And then I take daily maxima here. This is how it looks then in the record. I decluster. Basically, I want the maximum value of any of the event out, but I only want one value per event. This is my declustering, which is basically just this is the local maxima or not. And then in the end, I also do weekly maxima. This is it makes the time series shorter, so it's more easy to process. I use these 6 particular tide gauges. They have been selected because they are long and they are reasonably complete. And then from them I want to construct one record that is of hurricane surge activity in this region. And this record starts in 1923. That's when all these 6 records have data. Yeah, I do this processing. But in addition to this, I also remove the seasonal cycle. That's because to keep my extreme value model simple, then I don't want to model the seasonal cycle in the extremes. I just want simpler statistical models with fewer free parameters. For each day I look at the maximum value at any of the locations. Here's then one particular event. This is the Hurricane Katrina. Highest high water mark was 10 meters above mean sea level here. And this is how it looks. This pentacular is one of the tide gauges that I use. This other one I don't use because it's too short. But this is just to show that when I do this first step of low filtering, the low pass filtering, like 24-hour averages, then even though no matter these 2 locations there, one is twice as far away from this particular place as the other, they show pretty much the same record. So it's not terribly sensitive to my network not being that dense that I only have these 6 tide gauge records. But I will talk a lot about events of Katrina magnitude, and this is where my definition is basically this value here. The first thing is of course to show that this new surge index is really representative of hurricane activity. And this is just comparison with another one. This is landfalling accumulated cyclone energy. And you can see it peaks roughly at the same times. And also, if I look at the largest surge index events, then I can actually relate them to known hurricane events. 42 out of the top 50 I can relate to known tropical storms, and the remainder to severe winter storms, for example this particular one. And to further justify that it really is a hurricane proxy, then I correlate with basically every possible measure I could find of hurricane activity here, mostly based on wind speed in some way. And you can see all the correlations, they are quite good. These are correlation coefficients. And especially with records or hurricane measures that emphasize large landfalling hurricanes. And the only one where you don't see, or that is a little bit special, is that the normalized hurricane damages, there the high frequency correlation is actually better than the low frequency. And my interpretation is that there's still some bias due to societal changes in this particular record. It's quite hard to correct for that. This is a hurricane this is a record of hurricane surge threat. And this is how it looks if you saw these two records. This is one is the mean surge index over a season. It does not have a significant trend if you just do least squares trend fitting. Here's then in terms of frequency above some pretty arbitrary threshold, but there you can see an increase in the frequency. And for comparison, this landfalling accumulated cyclone energy and global temperature here. I've colored it red and blue. This is just because I later will talk about cold years. They're the blue years here, and the red warm years, they are the other ones. This is it here. They have basically split the data into two pools. One is all the extreme, all the surge index events in warm years, and the other pool is in the cold years. And you can see the extreme statistics is different in these two pools. And these crosses are the empirical return periods for each level. And here, when I fit as a generalized extreme value, they are both two stationary, one for each pool. It's a stationary generalized extreme value distribution I've fitted. Then here for Katrina magnitude events, then in this, the difference is a factor 2 in return period. From this, we can definitely conclude that the surge index is not stationary. So if we want to model it, then we should model it with a non-stationary generalized extreme distribution. And you can see this is a figure from Melissa actually. But we will model it with this kind of, we will model in the generalized extreme value distribution, there's something about the tail, the length of the tail or the fatness of the tail, and then there's something like standard deviation and the mean value sort of. It's they determine more, this one determines more the level of a more common typical event, or the frequency of typical, the level of a typical event. We can think of many potential predictors. I already showed you global temperature, that's just that it seemed to be related. Here's one paper from Emmanuel in 2005 where he noted that this PDI, power dissipation index, is it's something like integrated wind speed cubed, that it correlates with sea surface temperatures in this main development region. I will call that MDR. But there's then other papers that have noted that you can get pretty much exactly as good correlations with RMDR, relative sea surface temperature. That's the temperature difference between this particular main development region and the difference to the tropical mean temperature. And if you try to make statistical projections based on these two models, then you get completely different results. The sea surface temperature is warm, therefore you would expect it to increase, but the relative sea surface temperature has almost no change. So, but now we have a completely new data set. It's homogeneous, and we can actually test these two hypotheses, which one is fitting my data best. And here are the particular time series that I try to use to predict my surge index, global temperature, a main development region sea surface temperatures, and this relative sea surface temperatures. First, the global one, just for illustration. I have these 6 parameters in my generalized extreme value model. And these A's, they are all something about how sensitive is it to my predictor, in this case, global temperature. And they are all significantly positive here for global temperature, which means that extreme events, and especially the very extreme events, they will tend to increase with global temperature. And this is how much. You can see here for 1 degree warming, then the distribution shifts from here to here for Katrina magnitude event. This is, you can see how much that is here on the x-axis in a relative frequency. But one thing we also see is that it's basically all events of all magnitude become more frequent. So we get more events, and we also get more intense events. I've fitted with all these different predictors. For example, they have been proposed in the literature as something that all of them. And here I've ordered them by how well they fit my search index, and this is how the relative odds to the global temperature model. So this is the main development region model is 3 times better than the global temperature model. And here's the sensitivity that for 1 degree warming we get 1.8 to 5.5 times more frequent katrinas. We see that global temperatures is a really good predictor. It's much better than, for example, Southern Oscillation Index. That might be very surprising. That this very non-local predictor can actually predict extreme events for hurricanes. The relative NDR, it does worse than just a plain linear trend. The trend is so large that it can predict more than for example, INSO predictors. And the sensitivity is very high. This is also, of course, Katrina is a quite large event. It's not just a hurricane, it's a very intense hurricane. Another way to summarize the sensitivity is that you have this, as the temperatures, this is just output from this statistical model, but this blue indicates the calibration interval of the model, and outside that you're extrapolating. But as you warm the climate, you have a reduction in the return period. This is for the 2 best models, using global temperatures and main development region temperatures. I also have tried to then build a model where I basically built one model where I use a predictor from every single grid point in the world, and this is then an odds map relative to the global temperature model. And we see that no matter which temperature series almost anywhere in the world you choose, then the global temperatures are a better predictor than the local temperatures. And these are these sensitivity parameters, the A's that I talked about. But you see things in these that are basic, that you already know from the literature, that main development region temperatures tend to be favorable. So therefore they have red. The tails tend to get longer when it's warmer in this particular region. And you also see one interesting thing is that when it's blue here over continental US, is that my interpretation is that when you have many cyclones, then you tend to cool the local temperatures in this region. It can also be something to do with the steering of the cyclones, whether they make rainfall or not. And you also observe in all these maps here that there's no apparently particularly negative thing about the tropical mean temperatures. It's again suggesting that this relative NDR predictor is not really a good predictor. And that's consistent with these other relationships. For example, this blue region here in the El Niño region and red here, like this blue-red pattern in the El Niño region, it corresponds to the sign you would expect from known sign you would expect from known from previous published work. This is just summarizing these 3 parameters into just what it means for Katrina magnitude event. And this is you see in relative frequency, when you warm here, you'll really get many more Katrinas. And cool warming here would mean less frequent Katrinas. You can map then a global temperature projection through these different models. This is just one particular model and one particular scenario, but you can map these global temperatures, the main development region and temperatures, or the entire grid of temperatures through these different models. And this is then how many Katrinas per decade you would expect. And you can see it's quite a dramatic increase from this model. So the main result is that I've constructed this homogeneous record of hurricane surge threat, and I think that's quite important, like that there is now something homogeneous to look at rather than these observational record or products with observational biases. Katrinas, this is just a pure observation, there's no model fitting, but Katrinas are twice as frequent in globally warm years compared to cold years. And I found that temperatures in general are better predictors than this alternative hypothesis. And global temperatures in particular is one of the very good predictors. This is the sensitivity that roughly 0.4 degree global warming corresponds to a halving of the Katrina return period. And from that, because this is much less than the warming over the 20th century, then you could argue that we are crossing the threshold where Katrinas are more likely caused by global warming than not. Of course, this is correlation. It is not accurate. This is not any kind of causal analysis. It's correlations. Yeah. Are there any questions?